Fantasy Fixer stops in Las Vegas to check out the Raiders. There was a lot of hoopla in Sin City when Las Vegas added Davante Adams to play with his former college teammate. Unfortunately, didn't work out so well. They finished third in the AFC West and missed the playoffs. And now they got some big questions to answer to get things ready for 2023. Part of the changes involve a new quarterback in Las Vegas. Derek Carr was getting 15% of the Raiders' salary cap, being paid like the quarterback number 9. So Las Vegas deciding they're moving on from him. But why exactly do these two sides need to part ways, Dwayne?
Yeah, Marcus, the Carr contract is really problematic. If you look at it compared to the rest of the quarterbacks in the league, he's getting paid as the number 9 QB. That is just simply too much, because if we look at today's NFL, you can't account for 15% of the salary cap and not be able to run the offense that's winning in the league. He can't run RPOs. He can't handle design runs. If you can't do those two things, you have got to be elite from the pocket. And the best way to look at that is to look at the clean pocket grade. And for PFF, he grades out as number 40. So he's simply not good enough as a pocket passer to make up for all the other things he can't do at that cap number. So that really leaves the Raiders with two options. One, you can go all in and you trade for Aaron Rodgers. You get him back together with Davante Adams, and you hope that what he has left in the tank can be enough to get the offense back to the next level and maybe make a run to get back into the playoffs. But the other option, which seems more likely, is you draft a quarterback. The good news for the Raiders is they have a pick inside the top 7. Now, you're probably going to see 3 quarterbacks off the board based on the latest data we're seeing in mock drafts in the top 5. But they're in striking distance to trade up. So if there's one of those guys they like, they do have 2 choices, and they can move on from Carr, and they can reduce the salary cap in a big way if they decide to go with a rookie.
Then there was Josh Jacobs, who had a phenomenal year for the Raiders this past season, but we've seen recently running backs generally don't get paid. Dwayne, does he still fit in with this roster?
Yeah, Marcus, I really do think they've got to move on from Josh Jacobs, and that's not a knock on him. He is a really good running back, and there are differences between running backs. Some are really good, some are not good. So that's not the question. The question is, how valuable are they to a team? And the data has proven out, like, Josh Jacobs just simply isn't going to be worth an extra 2 wins per season when you bear it all out. So with that in mind, looking at all the other problems that the Raiders have, they've got to make a change. So when you look at the running backs that have a salary of at least $10 million or more per year, only 3 of 9 teams that have got that on the books made the playoffs this last season. 2 of those were Ezekiel Elliott with the Cowboys and Joe Mixon with the Bengals. I think you could make a very strong argument that both of those teams are in the playoffs without those 2 players. Looking at their efficiency, they were 2 of the worst running backs in the league, and that leads to the other point, which age comes really quickly. When Zeke signed his deal, we didn't think he was a bad running back. When Joe Mixon signed his deal, we didn't think that he was a bad running back. But because age is such a factor, the contracts have not aged well. So the solution here is you've got Zamir White, who you drafted last season. The Raiders claim to like him. Josh Jacobs was just so good he couldn't get on the field. So you have him. Add another running back in the 3rd round or later. Don't spend early capital. You've got too many holes, but add competition. Let those 2 battle it out. If you want to bring in a low-price free agent back as well, that's an option. Let those guys figure out who's going to be your starter in camp.
You mentioned the Raiders having holes in other places on the roster. The defense was graded 31st in DVOA by Football Outsiders. What do you suggest they do on that side of the ball?
Yeah, they have got to do something on defense. And the good news is, if Derek Carr's gone, that's $47.5 million they have available in space. But the Raiders have got to be smart. Don't go spend a bunch of money on an off-ball linebacker. Don't spend money on positions that are not going to change your team. The best way to do that is to go after edge rushers that can help you bring pressure, and to go after cornerbacks and safeties. The coverage and the pressure are the 2 things that you've got to bring together to get your defense better. So let's start with the defensive backs. The free agency crop is actually a little better there than edge rusher. So at cornerback, you've got James Bradbury. We've seen what he's been able to do for multiple teams that he's been added to. He's great in zone coverage. He can match up with the more physical receivers. You've got Jamel Dean as a free agent out of Tampa Bay. And then you've got Cameron Sutton. Those guys would all be upgrades versus who the Raiders have on their roster right now. At safety, you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's a guy that can also come down, play in the slot. He can help you against tight ends, so I really like him. And you've also got Jordan Poyer, who's done a nice job with the Bills. So those are two available options that could help them cover the deep area of the field, match up with slot receivers, etc. And then on the edge, there aren't as many names that I like. There are some older guys, so if you want to do a one-year deal, you could do something like that. But really, there are a couple names down the list. So you've got Marcus Davenport, a former high draft pick for the Saints. He has flashed in spots, hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then there's Rasheem Green, who's also done a similar thing in Houston. Hasn't been able to show that consistent production, but you just need someone across from Max Crosby that can add help. And it could even be a rotational player. It doesn't have to be someone that is going to play every single down. So I think there's a lot that the Raiders could do in free agency.
Those are our suggestions for what the Raiders should do. We will see ultimately how they roll the dice, but we want to hear from you. How do you think the Raiders should fix things in 2023? Hit us in the comments section below.